What is up, everyone? Welcome to There Can Only Be One, the podcast that makes the all-star playlist of your favorite artists. Now, our next guest, when we were initially talking about coming on to or having him come onto the show, I'm like, okay, who do you want to cover? Which discography do you want to go down? And he said Elton John. I'm like, holy crap, that's a lot of records. Let's pare it down a little bit. So we settled on the king of pop, Michael Jackson. And here to join me down that road is Alex Whistle, also known as ACOfficial on YouTube and on Twitch. Dude, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I am doing fantastic.
So I know how much you like Michael Jackson. But why don't you tell the audience why you suggested MJ?
Let me just put it like this. The room that I'm currently recording this podcast in is about 90% Michael Jackson memorabilia. So, it's a no-brainer.
Now I've seen you on some of those shopping trips, to the vinyl stores and whatnot. So I've seen that face of yours when you find that find, and yeah, trust me, it's like Christmas in the middle of whatever month. It doesn't matter what month it is. It's like Christmas. I get it.
Absolutely.
Now you also do a lot of remixes, not just of other artists, but of Michael Jackson as well. So are you approaching this more as a fan or as someone who has gone through a lot of these tracks and really dissected them and hearing the different parts that make the song?
Especially with the earlier stuff, I'm going in as a fan, and then for the later, more popular era of Michael Jackson, I'm going in a little bit with that production mindset.
Okay, so this is gonna be interesting because I'm not gonna lie, there were a lot of these albums that I didn't even know existed until it was time for me to do my research. Like, around Off the Wall, I'm like, okay, cool, we're good. And then I'm like, wait, there's how many albums before that? Oh crap, I got some music I got to catch up on here. But let's go through the rules of what you're going to deal with here. We are going through 12 studio albums of the Michael Jackson discography. We are ignoring live albums and greatest hits, remixes, and compilation CDs, and no soundtrack, since how he was not at no point in time was he the sole artist on a soundtrack. We're also not touching any of the Jackson 5 albums. We are only dealing with Michael Jackson's solo career. Now, I did mention that we're not touching compilations. We are covering one, sort of. For the history, past, present, and future album, we're ignoring disc 1 because that's just a best of. But disc 2 was an entire collection of new material. So when we get to that point, we are only covering disc 2 because that's where the new stuff is. But we have to go back to the beginning. We need to start with January 24th, 1972, and the release of Got to Be There. The album is certified gold in the US. It peaked at number 14 on the Billboard charts and number 3 on the Billboard R&B charts. There were 4 singles off of this one, Rockin' Robin being the highest charting of it, hitting number 2 in the US. Now, I'll admit, right, I know the singles. So the depth of my Michael Jackson knowledge isn't exactly as wide as it should be. So I'm going to let Alex do a lot of driving the bus on this one here. But I will say I went with In Our Small Ways off of this album. But Alex, what did you go with?
I had a toss-up between 2 songs on this album as being my favorite. Wanna Be Where You Are and Girl, Don't Take Your Love From Me, or Don't Take Your Love Away. Just based off of like production alone, these are 2 of the strongest songs that are there that are original, because Rockin' Robin, being such a smash hit, is a cover.
Mm-hmm. And it's not the only cover off of this album, too.
No. When it comes to Michael's early career, especially when he was under Motown, a lot of the songs on there ended up being covers.
I mean, that's kind of like the way it goes. You know, you're getting your solo career started. You do a lot of the standards until, you know, you build up, I guess, that touring resume. But of course, you mentioned two songs, and the name of the podcast is There Can Only Be One. So it comes down to this point. So Alex, if there's only one song off this album, which one's it gonna be?
Want to Be Where You Are. Hands
Okay.
down.
So aside from being, you know, really good on the production side, what is it about that song that stands out for you?
Vocally, it's one of the strongest songs on that album. And it's impressive for someone that age at that point, biologically, right? Because around that time is when you're going to hit puberty, your voice is going to change. So there's a lot of room for possible disaster in the recording studio when your voice is changing, right? And that one there it's crazy because in the multi-track session, there is the early version, which was like take one, and they ended up going with take two for the public release, which both of them were very, very strong.
I'm when I was listening to this album, I'm not gonna lie, it was at times hard to deal with some of the higher pitch, higher octave stuff. I do completely agree that at that age to have that strong a voice is pure talent. The octave kind of got to me a little bit. It got better as the albums went on, as it's bound to do. But for me, at that point, it was a little high. And I listened to a lot of progressive metal, so it was a little high. But we now move on to the same year, but August 4th, 1972. The album is Ben. This album went silver in the UK. It peaked at number 5, though, in the US. There was one single off of this album, that being the title track Ben, which of course was the title track to the movie of the same name. The song itself won the Golden Globe for Best Original Song from a Film and was nominated for an Oscar that year, but lost to The Morning After from the movie The Poseidon Adventure. The song did hit number 1 in the US and Australia. I personally went with, and I hope I get this right, Shooby-Dooby-Doo-Da-Day off of this album, but what did you go with?
I ended up going with Ben. It's a little bit of a cop-out. Just real quick, I want to circle back to what you had mentioned about the pitch being a little bit on the irritating side. I totally agree, which is why, just from my own preference, I don't listen to a lot of the Jackson 5 and early Michael, just because, yeah, I get it. It kind of hurts the ears after a while.
I mean, I get it. You know, like anyone who's listened to, been watching TV, then all of a sudden, like a mini bops commercial comes on, you're gonna hear it. And trust me, there is nothing worse than 1877 Cars for Kids, but it's sometimes hard to hear that higher register unless you're mentally prepared for it, and you can hear it starting to come down though in this album. Next up, we've got Music and Me, released April 13th, 1973. The album peaked at number 92 in the US. There were 4 singles off of this album. With a Child's Heart was the highest charting one at number 50. Personally, I went with Euphoria off this one, the song, not the Zendaya show. What did you go with?
I also went with Euphoria because it was crazy to hear, I don't want to say that content, but like that style and just lyrically young Michael Jackson singing that.
Now, I mean, he is singing in a lot of cases. He's singing standards and songs that are written and definitely not by him. Okay, let's put this out on Front Street right now. We are not going to be dealing with any of the controversy surrounding Michael Jackson and any of his alleged actions or any of his alleged drug problems. We are here to talk about the music, full stop. That's it. If you came to hear us bash Michael Jackson for things he allegedly did or did not do, this is not that podcast. We are here to celebrate the music. But that being said, you have a young artist and he's singing songs that are of a, for lack of a better term, more risque lyrical content. Does it hit weird?
Absolutely. But I don't, to go a little away from Michael Jackson here, I think that happens a lot in the music industry because, in a lot of cases, sex sells. And so does I guess the message that you're trying to put out there, regardless of you being a child or not. So it's, in a way, it's corporate's way to push something out there to make money.
Corporate.
Those bastards.
Corporate may as well be a 4-letter word. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Forever Michael, released January 16th, 1975. The album peaked at number 101 on the Billboard charts. There were 2 singles off of this one, the highest charting being Just a Little Bit of You, which charted at number 23. Personally, on my list, I ended up going with Cinderella Stay a While. But what did you go with off of Forever Michael?
I picked One Day in Your Life because I guess just the message behind it is very touching. The music behind it as well. Like, you listen to that and you just can't help but sort of replay happy memories that you would have had with a specific person, whether they're someone that you were romantic with or someone that you just loved very much unromantically. It's magic. It really is.
I will say too, there are a lot of songs in his discography that really did kind of tug at the heartstrings, whether he wrote them or not. And he definitely did have a way of portraying those lyrics well, especially in, albeit in a higher register, but especially in some of those earlier albums. But it's about to get big, because next up is Off the Wall. Released August 10th, 1979, this is the first Michael Jackson album that's actually produced by Mr. Quincy Jones. The album hit number 1 in Australia, number 2 in New Zealand, and number 3 in the US and the UK. It is, all right, time to get the math here, 9 times platinum in US, 6 times platinum in New Zealand and the UK, 5 times platinum in Australia. It's platinum in Canada, France, and Germany, and the Netherlands. There were 5 singles off of this one. Both Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You hit number 1 on the US charts. This album is actually inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. That happened in the year 2008. Now, we had a Twitter shout out for this album here. Ray Shavo went with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. I did not go with that song, but I want to hear what you went with.
For Off the Wall, I went with the album title track, Off the Wall.
Okay.
And honestly, I have a soft spot for that album. It ended up being the very first Michael Jackson album I ever got. And turns out it used to belong to my mom, and my grandpa was the one that was hoarding it in the closet. And one day, I think I was in the 2nd grade, so I couldn't have been, older than 12, 11, and I go, what are these in the closet beside like the tools and stuff? And he goes, those are records. And that was also my first introduction into the vinyl world. And he goes, you can have this whole stack. And Off the Wall was the first album that was in that stack.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it was pretty special.
I'm so glad it was vinyl in the closet and not something like just, for a different podcast, because otherwise this would be a very different story. I personally, oh God, we went there, didn't we? I personally went with Get on the Floor. And maybe it's because, I'm in a band and we play out on shows, and every now and then, like in between sets, obviously the radio will come on, and, songs like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You, they get played a lot. So Get on the Floor, while it's still a really, really good song, and I'm not knocking the singles there, it wasn't as overplayed for me. And maybe that's where I'm coming at this from. I've heard most of the, at this point now, we're in that 3 album stretch where it starts to get really, really good. A lot of those songs, those bigger songs, I've heard over and over and over again. So maybe they just hit differently. But when I was going through this album, Get on the Floor really stuck out.
Especially that your main instrument is bass, and the song is built around a bass track done by Louis Johnson, which honestly is probably one of the biggest names that Quincy provided for this album.
Oh, the musicality on it. Like, in comparison to the previous 4 albums, you can see what a producer of a Quincy Jones caliber can bring to an album.
Mm-hmm. Big names, the very creative people.
You're talking about big. The next album it's this little album. Yeah, it sold a couple, That album is Thriller, released November 30th, 1982. This album peaked at number 1 pretty much across the universe. It is. All right. Here, I'm going to need to catch my breath on this one here, so bear with me. This album is triple diamond in the US. That means 34 times platinum. It is 17 times platinum in Australia. It's triple diamond in Canada. 15 times platinum in the UK. 12 times platinum in New Zealand. It's diamond in France. It's triple platinum in Germany. It is 6 times platinum in Switzerland. There were 7 singles off of this album. Beat It and Billie Jean both hit number 1 in the US. Now, interestingly enough, okay, the title track, Thriller, greatest dance-along song ever, only peaked at number 4 in the US. But it did hit number 1 in France and Spain. By the way, Want to Be Starting Something also hit number 1 here in Canada. Now, we've been skipping over the awards because Michael Jackson's, he's won a few. In fact, at the 1984 Grammys, he set the Guinness Book of World Records on this album for most Grammy wins in one night. It was 8 Grammys. Coincidentally, one of them was not for this album. One of them was for his audio reading of E.T., the Extraterrestrial. Yeah, not this one. Now, to say that this album sold a lot is kind of selling it short. This is the best-selling album worldwide of all time. There is none greater than this across the world. But in the US, it's only the second highest-selling album of all time. Now, it's the best-selling original non-compilation album of all time, but the second highest-selling album. The highest-selling album, beating it out by 4 million units, is the Eagles' Greatest Hits. That is 38 times platinum, according to Wikipedia, where this album is only 34 times platinum. So Michael be slacking, apparently. I personally went with Thriller off of this one, although this one was really, really hard. By the way, another shout out from Ray Chavo. He went with Pretty Young Thing off this one, but what did you go with?
Again, I was teeter-tottering between Thriller and PYT, and I think I'm going to go with PYT as my main choice.
That was on my short list as well. Like, as much as I say that I'm not the biggest Michael Jackson fan, I think you have to be legally deaf, completely deaf, to not find something off this album. Like, this album literally defined an entire decade. Put the Eagles aside. This is the highest selling album of all time worldwide. No matter what you think about Michael Jackson, no matter what genre of music that you listen to, and you know me, Alex, I'm a bit of a metalhead.
Oh yeah.
But you cannot, no matter how hard you try, discount just how important this album is in the history of music, period. So I'm going to ask you, rather than why'd you pick this song kind of thing, how hard was it to narrow it down to just one song off this one?
Let me put it like this. There are 9 songs on the album, and 7 of them are main singles. So it's very difficult to go through practically an unskippable album that's done astronomically well. But at the end of the day, I went with what song would someone not necessarily choose, because you look at just the side A, for example, side A, which is From Wanna Be Starting Something to Thriller. Every song on side A and 90% of side B is the biggest names out there. Beat It, Billie Jean, Human Nature. So everybody's going to go towards what got played more on the radio and on like in weddings and stuff like that, bigger impact songs. PYT, even though it's an amazing song, had its own single, is not one that you hear often on the radio. So it was a bit of a no-brainer, but again, there's a lot of struggle there because this album is just so epic.
Oh, there is, I would be hard-pressed, especially in today's market of the non-existence of physical media. You will never, ever make an album that would ever come close today to reaching those sales levels. And you have to think that a lot of those albums have probably been purchased twice, thrice, and probably fourice. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is. I think this is the one album that kind of makes the case for it. I don't even know if there's an artist out there that could make an album today that would sell that much. Maybe Taylor Swift, but that's about it.
I want to hop on what you just said about physical media. And I think that because of lack of wanting physical media, especially with today's generation, that makes me sound really old. There will never be another artist out there that can or will top what Thriller sold physically. And what's crazy is that the main number of sales for Thriller is just on the album itself. That's not on the 25th anniversary or the 40th anniversary pressing. This is just out of regular old Thriller. So, the number is probably 100 times bigger if you were to consider the 25th anniversary and the 40th anniversary. And on top of that, what really drove Thriller sales was the Thriller video, and that they came out with the making of, which ended up skyrocketing sales for years. So
yeah, and just to put things into perspective here. So while you were saying all that, I decided to take a look and went to chartmasters.org and did a search for Spotify's most streamed albums. And I'm just looking at like the top 50 here, and Michael Jackson is nowhere to be found. But you have to think that there's enough of those albums out there. I'm sure everyone, it probably came with the house that you bought. It's like, here's the stove, here's the refrigerator, here's your complimentary copy of Thriller. I get it. The most streamed album on here is actually Ed Sheeran's, I guess, Divide Deluxe, whatever it is, with 13 billion streams. But you take a look at like some of the artists on here, like Bad Bunny, Dua Lipa, Post Malone. Post Malone has 2 of them on there. But I don't know if any of these artists, as good as they are and as rabid as their fan bases may be, no one's rushing out to the record stores to scoop up every album. Like, there were days, and I remember there were albums that came out when I skipped class one time to actually go line up at the HMV to go buy a copy of Use Your Illusions 1 and 2 when they came out on day of. You're never going to get that anymore, I don't think. Not with CDs.
No. Mm-mm.
So,
well, with BTS, and that's just me singling them out a little bit, they have such a big fan base, but also the amount of work they put into their product makes the people want to go for those like Midnight Madness release or day of releases, because they package stuff with posters and cards and collectibles and blah 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 and big books. You don't really see that with a lot of artists unless it's an anniversary box set.
Mm-hmm.
But with the and that's where I think streaming is hurting the music industry a lot. It's convenient. It's crazy convenient. But the amount of money that an artist would make with physical sales versus digital sales like that, it's the pay cut's just massive.
Yeah. I mean, you'll never see it, right? But I wonder if an artist, maybe like an Ed Sheeran or maybe like a Taylor Swift, if they ever put out an album and did not release it digitally, physical media only, even then, I don't think anyone would sell close to Thriller.
No.
Which, if Taylor Swift wants to take a shot at it, go right ahead. I'm willing to eat my words, but I don't see it. The idea of people going to the record store and maybe it's just the nostalgia of the record store. You go to the CD rack and flip. There's the CD. There was something soothing about that sound of the CDs, and then when you get to the end, it's like all the way to the back, and then you get to the next rack. That's an experience that it's unfortunate that some people aren't getting these days. But before I get on my old man soapbox here and diatribe more, we have one more album from the 80s, and it was no slouch either here, because that was Bad. Released August 31st, 1987. The album peaked number one pretty much through the entire cosmos, everywhere. It is 11 times platinum in the US, 14 times platinum in the UK, 9 times platinum in New Zealand, 7 times platinum in Canada, 6 times platinum in Australia, 5 times platinum in Switzerland. It's diamond in France, quadruple platinum in Germany, and platinum in the Netherlands. You mentioned 7 singles off of Thriller. There are 9 singles off of this one, and the first 5 all hit number 1 in the US. That included I Just Can't Stop Loving You, Bad, The Way You Make Me Feel, Man in the Mirror, and Dirty Diana. Now here's a funny one. Smooth Criminal, which was released as a single, only hit number 7 in the US. But then Alien Ant Farm covered it, and that cover's fun.
Yeah.
And it hit number 1 on the modern rock charts. Now, admittedly, not the same chart, but I find it funny that song hit number 1 on an American chart, although it's not the Billboard 200. There's an asterisk on it, but I will say I do think the Alien Ant Farm, and this may be blasphemy here, but the Alien Ant Farm version is better than the Michael Jackson version.
Agreed. 100 times agreed. Alien Ant Farm was the first version of Smooth Criminal I heard before even discovering how the depthness of Michael Jackson's catalog at the time.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, aside from being a good cover and a decent song to start with, this is the template. Like, if you're a rock band and you want to do a cover song, you want to make it your own, this should literally be taught in rock schools. Like, you want to make a cover your own, this is how you do it. You do something like this. Now, Ray Shavo went with Smooth Criminal, and good friend of the show, Sean Faust, he wrote Dirty Diana about 3 times, so I don't know if that was on purpose or he just really, 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 really liked the song. I also went with Dirty Diana, but what did you go with off of Bad?
I went with Liberian Girl.
Really? Deep cut.
Very deep cut. Liberian Girl, vocally is a little bit more tame, because if you really listen to Bad, it's coming off more rock style in his voice, a lot more loud, a lot more in your face. Liberian Girl is like the only R&B song other than I Just Can't Stop Loving You in that style. But what really got me on that song was the entire ending of the track, which is all the harmonies and then his lead just adding those ad libs. It was honestly crazy.
I think the thing for me when it comes to Dirty Diana is this was the king of pop. And here he was, doing his best to plant his flag in the world of rock at the same time. And of all people, you bring in Steve Stevens, like Billy Idol's guitarist, Steve Stevens, one of the monster guitarists of the 80s, Steve Stevens, and you let him wail? Well done, good sir. Well done.
It's Dirty Diana. Here's the thing. This too is very hard for me to pick a song. Just to kind of correct you a little bit, there are 11 songs on the album, and 10 of the 11 are actually proper singles, because Just Good Friends, I don't think, got a single, but everything else eventually did get their single. It didn't happen all at once. But, you hear a song like Bad and The Way You Make Me Feel, right away, those are two really, really big songs. Another Part of Me, Man in the Mirror, also really, really big. Dirty Diana, Smooth Criminal, those are also massive. And then it's like, where do you go from there? You have to pick one. If I had any hair, I'd pull it out.
And think about 1987 too for Steve Stevens, right? Like, this album comes out and it's massive, right? And Dirty Diana is such a good song. But in that year, he also won the Grammy for Best Pop Instrumental Performance for the anthem from Top Gun. Like you want to talk about a year for a guitarist? Steve Stevens slayed that one. So now, before we get into the 90s and Michael Jackson's later career, I want to take a second here, and give you the floor here and let us know about your remixing, your YouTube channel, and about what you're doing over on Twitch.
Okay. I feel like Twitch would be the shorter start here. On Twitch, I just recently got my hands on some software in order to stream off my computer, because I used to stream just on the PlayStation. And now that I can stream on the computer, it's a lot more fun for me, because I feel like a lot of my better games are on the computer. It's small. I have a couple followers, but it's really fun just to mess around, be a goofball on Twitch. As for my YouTube channel, a lot of the times I do a session remix, and depending on the song, you'll get a lot of unused sections, whether it be an extra verse or unused instruments. Maybe the song, if it faded out on the album version, it'll continue on tape. And one of the biggest artists that I focus on my channel is Michael Jackson, which is also one of the big reasons why I wanted to choose him for this episode. Just because not only are you hearing him grow as a songwriter or vocalist, but especially later on, as we're getting into the 90s here, he is more and more involved in the production of the instrumental of the song. So there's going to be quite a few notes for those later albums.
So when you're when you're approaching a Michael Jackson song, is it easier for you to approach it, a song that you're a fan of, or is it easier to approach one of the songs that you're maybe not necessarily spinning on a regular basis, so you have the ability to disconnect from it a touch?
There's a lot of ways that I go about remixing songs in general, but for Michael Jackson specifically, I will mainly play the vocal track and see what comes from there. But I'll also listen to the entire tape first and then see what exactly am I working with session versus album release, because there's a lot of differences in the mix that gets put out. And Bruce, who is his main mixer or engineer, his main engineer would put out between 10 to 30 different mixes of the songs, and only pick to have to pick one is also troubling, because that's what we're doing here. And it's really difficult. Wow, I feel like I'm rambling here, because it's so hard to explain, because every song has a different it clicks differently. Like if I were to put in Thriller versus a song from the 90s like Black or White, I'm going to be doing a whole different analysis, or a whole different type of idea will sort of emerge, because not every song is easy to remix. If you hear something, it really has to speak to you. I don't know what else more to say. It's just
yeah, I didn't warn you that there was gonna be thinking on the test today, did I?
I got smoke coming out of my ears.
Oh crap, we broke them. We broke them. Get the fire extinguisher. Or if the smoke's coming out of your ears, then you're smoking it wrong. Sorry. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next album. That would be Dangerous. Released, much like smoke coming out of your ears. Released November 26, 1991. This album hit number 1 everywhere except for Canada, where it only peaked at number 3. There were another 9 singles off of this one. Black or White was the only one that hit number 1 in the U.S. And I'm not going to lie. I remember the video release for Black or White. The 11-minute long music video release. And I remember watching it. Like, this was an event. Like, anyone who grew up in that time will tell you, this was an event. The fact that, according to Wikipedia, there were like 500 million viewers around the world who sat and tuned in for a music video premiere. 11 minutes long. And I remember, and it wasn't just my reaction, but if I remember correctly, I think the reaction of the VJs on Much Music was a lot of like, the f*** was that? Because you had 4 minutes of freaking Michael Jackson rage quitting the end of the video here by smashing everything. Like this, the song aside, and the song's kind of catchy, but then it goes 4 minutes like he's playing Grand Theft Auto in real life. Like, what? This was like the beginning of excess for him. But it still didn't hurt the album because it went 8 times platinum in the US, 10 times platinum in Australia, 6 times platinum in Canada, diamond in France, quadruple platinum in Germany, triple platinum in the Netherlands, 6 times platinum in New Zealand, 5 times platinum in Switzerland, and 6 times platinum in the UK. Now, Ray Chavo, he went with Remember the Time. What did you go with?
For Dangerous, I picked Keep the Faith.
Wait, with Bon Jovi? So why keep the faith?
The short answer is church. You listen to that song, you got these big choir vocals, you have minimal instrumentation, it's voice driven, it's vocally driven, it's powerful, it's loud. It's something that I secretly enjoy. Like most people, and I'm going to say this publicly, most people don't know this, but I really enjoy that orchestra type, big vocal, sort of like choir-esque songs, because when you hear a choir, it's almost like listening to an orchestra. They all have their different pitches and tones, making an unbelievable sound, and it just gives me goosebumps when I hear stuff like that.
Oh, especially I'm sure if you break down the stems of a song and you hear those tracks all by themselves, like I can just imagine. I would love to hear the choir remix only version of Madonna's Like a Prayer. I'm sure that actually sounds amazing.
I actually have that.
And I'll be right over.
I'll mix it down and I'll send it to you. It's pretty good.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. But yeah, you're right. A choir does add everything. Now, for me, I mentioned on the Bad album, getting Steve Stevens on there and playing guitar on Dirty Diana. And then I'm watching Much Music, because that's around the time when Much Music was still playing music. And there's Michael Jackson, besides Slash from Guns N' Roses. And the song is Given to Me. And there's everything stops at that point. There's Slash, right? The baddest guitarist out there at the time with the King of Pop. Like, and the song's good too. Like, I personally, I feel like it maybe could have had a bit more meat to the mix, and I'm sure a remix of that song could add a lot more. Maybe crunch might be what I'm thinking of, but the song and Slash, like that song right there, sold it for me on that album. And that's the thing too. And you mentioned that, going back to the Off the Wall album and the Thriller album. What the musicianship that Quincy Jones helped bring to the production of those albums. So now you're seeing guitarists like Steve Stevens and Slash coming in. You're seeing a lot of these musicians come in and want to be on these albums, and it just makes it more of an event.
Yeah, well, what's crazy about Dangerous is that it wasn't even produced by Quincy Jones. It was solely produced by Michael Jackson with the help of big-time producer Teddy Riley and his mixing engineer Bruce Swedian. And you look at, so unfortunately recently there's been a theft in overseas at one of these like little conventions there. And one of Michael's longtime friends in the studio ended up doing like little seminars, and he got robbed. And in the stuff that got stolen and leaked was footage from behind the scenes working in the studio. And you see how involved Michael Jackson is in the creation of the songs. He's there at every session, every recording, whether it be instruments or a choir or just for himself. He's in there, he's writing notes. Michael Jackson, fun fact about him is that he cannot properly play any instruments, but he can sing every sound that he's thinking of, so that his studio musicians, can lay that down for him. And especially in the 90s where, you got MIDI that's like coming out from the shadows pretty much, it really helped this album along, because this album was supposed to be a box set originally. And that's where History ended up coming out of, because all those songs were supposed to be on Dangerous as well. And they ended up with like 30 or 35 songs. And Bruce and Epic Records was like, there's no way that we're going to release that big of an album. And the album's already running at over an hour long. And for the time where vinyl was still being sold, they're like, no, it's not going to happen. Cut it. And that's where that other album comes from. But no, it's really insane.
Which is fascinating when you realize that, the album comes out in 91. And that's the same year that Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 came out, as I recall. So, there was a history of bands that were able to do, multi-album or big double album kind of releases. I think at that time, Dangerous could have maybe come out as a double album, but, it makes sense to hold stuff back and release it a little bit later. That way you're not stretching it too thin kind of thing. But I mean, Dangerous itself, while it wasn't the success that Thriller and Bad were, it was still a solid album. Now, you mentioned some of those songs ended up on History, because that's where we're going next. History, Past, Present, and Future, Book 1, released June 20th, 1995. It was a 2-disc set, the first one being just a greatest hits, the second one being all new material. Of course, it peaked at number 1 everywhere, as a Michael Jackson album around that time is supposed to do. It's 8 times platinum in the US and in Australia, 5 times platinum in Canada, diamond in France again, triple platinum in Germany, triple platinum in the Netherlands, 10 times platinum in New Zealand, triple platinum in Switzerland, and 4 times platinum in the UK. There were 7 singles off of this one. You Are Not Alone was the only one to hit number 1 in the US. Ray Chavo went with They Don't Care About Us. Me personally, I ended up going with Tabloid Junkies. It was a good song, but what did you go with?
I also went with They Don't Care About Us. I need to know from you, because Tabloid Junkie is in a way a deep cut on this album. Why did you choose it?
Every now and then, and as I'm listening to this, I thought this was going to be an easy disc, to be honest. I thought it was going to be Scream and then I'd be done with it, right? But as I'm going through, and there's something really, really raw with a lot of the lyrics off this album. And yes, I completely understand it. I know we said we weren't going to go down this road, but this is when a lot of the allegations are coming in and people are kind of, like there's a lot of crap that's going on that's not on the record, or at least on the CDs in Michael Jackson's, life at this point. If I remember correctly, this is around when Lisa Marie Presley and he were together. Like there's a lot of crap going on in the tabloids, and there's a lot of rawness in those lyrics. And when you go back and take a look at it, like I'm not defending anybody or anything kind of thing, but you have to think that if this is the creative outlet, right? If this is what he needs to say at the time, he did it in a way that actually made some of these songs, really good. And I liken it to, and if I'm looking for a tonality sense, the Dixie Chicks, I'm Not Ready to Make Nice, or Not Ready to Make Nice. That song is raw, like just raw, and them coming out of the hardest part of their career after the whole slagging George Bush at a concert. Yeah, like, and there's a vulnerability in it, and I think there's a vulnerability in a song like Tabloid Junkies as well. Like, right or wrong, he had to be dealing with a lot of stuff at the time.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on that a little bit, songs like Tabloid Junkie and Money and DS, what else real quick? Too Bad. Those songs originally were not going to be on the album because, like I mentioned, the other songs like Scream, They Don't Care About Us and stuff like that, all those were recorded and finished around the time of Dangerous. And then the allegations happen. They cancel what should have been the direct sequel to Dangerous, and waited, I can't remember how many years.
About 4 years.
2 albums. Yeah. And then finally, he's like, let me go back in there. They worked on a lot of these songs, and they're like, okay, now the album's 100% finished, which honestly gives it a great touch to the album, because it's more specific. All the other albums felt like they were great for their eras, right, with the sounds and just the overall lyrical messages and whatnot. But you listen to an album like Dangerous, and that one's really specific to that situation. You have Scream, that's essentially a song about just wanting to break out and just grab everybody and shake them and yell at them, like what his message is. You have They Don't Care About Us, which was a song pretty much trying to fight against the system and racial profiling, just all the racism that's still going on to this day worldwide. You have songs like Earth Song, which is just trying to save the planet, especially around this time. Global warming was starting to really get in the headlines there, and people weren't really taking it seriously.
Still aren't.
No, they still aren't. You Are Not Alone, funny enough, wasn't even supposed to be on the album. It just happened that R. Kelly bumped into Michael Jackson and said, hey, I got a song that people say that I sound like you on. Can you take a listen? And he goes, okay, I'll record. But Tabloid Junkie is a song I really wish I had this session to, because I feel like in a way his message gets a little buried within the beatboxing and the background noise and the instrument overall in the song. So I think a stripped back version to really get that message through would be pretty epic.
And some good guitar. Call up Steve Stevens. We now move on to Invincible, where we had to wait until October 30th, 2001 for the release. The album went double platinum in US and the Australia, and platinum in 7 other countries. The album hit number 1 in 7 countries, but again, not Canada. where it only hit number 3. There were 3 singles off of this one. You Rock My World hit number 1 in France and Spain, but in the US, it only hit number 10. So off of Invincible, what did you go with?
I went with You Rock My World. It was a little bit of a no-brainer for me, because me personally, and with a lot of people reflected in the sales there, felt like this album was on the weaker side. But later on, I found out why, which was at the time he had, the Beatles catalog. He had just bought over 50% of Sony and all those publishing rights and whatnot. So business-wise, he was killing it big time. And people within those companies like Sony really didn't like that he had such a big power over the music and the decisions of what they do and what they don't do. So with that, he ended up having a lot of people write the songs for him. And it goes kind of back to like his early stage in his career, which was lyrically he was involved, but musically was completely out of the shadows, like wasn't involved whatsoever. You Rock My World ended up being so big because I feel like it was more of a true Michael Jackson song in this in the way of how groovy it is, how catchy it was, and stuff like that. And honestly, so this is the song that helped me really discover Michael Jackson, because to kind of go back to your memory of seeing, Given to Me and Black and White and stuff like that, You Rock My World was premiering on Much Music, and I had just gotten home from school. And because it was such a big thing, Michael Jackson's big comeback, new single, new short film with Chris Tucker, and who played the Godfather again?
Oh, Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando was in the video as well. And, it was a big, big thing. They made Michael Jackson Day on Much Music and VH1 and MTV. And they played all the music videos. They played all the movies. And then they finished with the premiere of You Rock My World. And then from then on, I was just hooked.
So I'm going to jump on 2 points here that you've said. And the first one here, and I'm just going to soapbox this a little bit, is that yes, stations like MTV and Much Music had the ability to shape the zeitgeist. They had the ability to, introduce so much music to the masses, to the point of you wanted to go out and get the album. You wanted to go out to the shows. Music was an event. Music still is an event. And I'm not going to lie, like the last 3 years, from going into the pandemic where like music and concerts are completely shut down to now, and we're just starting to get back up and running. Now is the time for a channel like an MTV or a Much Music to pick up the mantle and get back to what made it the cultural icon that it was at the time. Get back to showing music videos. And there are still bands and artists out there doing damn good music videos. Like the number of films that I have covered on It's Not That Bad that came from music video directors, there's some phenomenal visuals and some really cool, cinematic art styles that come out of that. And it should be celebrated. And don't sit there and say, well, you just go watch it on YouTube. So what? Make it an event. Make it something where you can't just on demand it. And that was the thing. You had to wait to hear your song, and you ended up hearing a bunch of other really, really cool songs along the way. And that's how you discovered more music. So if Much Music or MTV or any kind of channel wants to get back to what it made it, what it was, and dance who you came with, do that. do that, and I'll go back and watch even bands that in hindsight I sit there and go, they were okay, but I like that album. I never would have discovered that album had I not actually been watching a channel like Much Music. Like there are CDs and cassettes, yes, cassettes in my collection where they were bought solely on the fact that I got into them because of watching them on Much Music. And
I agree.
If you want record sales to maybe start to creep back up to Thriller levels, or even any of these lower selling albums, get a music video station back on the air. But that being said, the second thing I want to pick up in is that I am so glad that you said this was a weak album, because I'm not going to lie. This was where the struggle was real. And yes, I did end up going with You Rock My World, because it did feel like the most Michael Jackson of a song on this album. Like this feels like, I've always thought every artist is allowed at least one or two bad albums in a long career. The longer the career, the more bad albums you're allowed to have. Obviously, the law of averages. This felt like that album. And I'm not picking on like the first albums, because you can't fight your own register at that age, right? You're going to sing the way you're going to sing. This album, you're right. It felt like he was putting out an album for putting out an album's sake.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was also the last album of new material that he put out before he passed away. But that leads us to the December 10th, 2010 release of Michael, the first posthumous release with new songs. Double platinum in France, platinum in the US, Canada, and UK. It hit number 1 in Germany and the Netherlands, and only number 3 in the US. There were 4 singles off of this one. Hold My Hand with Akon hit number 39 on the Billboard charts. That's the song I ended up going with, but what did you go with?
I ended up with Best of Joy, because I also had picked Hold My Hand, but after sort of like discovering the backstory behind the song Best of Joy, I kind of leaned towards that one more.
Really? Okay, so what's the backstory on that?
So Best of Joy was originally made during the Thriller era, and it was supposed to be just called The Toy, which was a song for a Richard Pryor movie by the same name. Was fully recorded, finished, was pitched to, I can't remember who the studio was that was making the movie. They went, yeah, it's all right, we're not going to take it. So I got shelved. And then what Michael does with a lot of these songs, even on like Bad and Dangerous and Thriller and all that, is that a lot of these songs come from way earlier and then eventually morph into what they are. So Best of Joy, by the time that it hit the Michael album, had been re-recorded, rewritten, and the music was completely changed as well, because it was supposed to get released during the This Is It tour. Because when This Is It was announced in 2009, there was supposed to be an album to follow that tour, basically going like, hey, these are the songs that I chose to rewrite, rework for this last album that was supposed to come out after Invincible. Unfortunately, after he passed, it caused a huge ripple into everything, because you have songs that lyrically were finished but not musically, or they were musically finished but not lyrically. So there was a lot of big decisions that need to be made by people who weren't Michael Jackson. And unfortunately, this album has had a lot of controversy because it featured, I think it was 3 or 4 songs that weren't even sung by Michael Jackson on the album, and they were released as Michael Jackson songs. This album came out, what, in 2009, 2010? 2010.
2010.
And it did not get a proper re-release until 2022, because Sony or the Michael Jackson estate had won its lawsuit against the Sony company, being like, hey, you're making money with his name and they're not even his songs. So it got re-released with those songs taken off.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy.
I just find it funny that I remember actually seeing the toy when it came out.
Yeah, it was supposed to be the intro song for the intro credits.
That was an interesting movie. I still remember seeing that. Richard Pryor, Jackie Gleason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We've finally come to the last Michael Jackson album of original material, the second posthumous release, that was Escape, released May 9th, 2014. The album hit #1 in 3 countries. Those were France, Spain, and the UK. It's platinum in France and gold in several other countries. There were 2 singles off of this one, the highest peaking being Love Never Felt So Good, which peaked at #9. I ended up going with the title track, Escape. What did you go with?
I also went with Escape. This album was a very big no-brainer for me, mainly because 90% of it had leaked years before this album was even being worked on. And so we got to hear a lot of the earlier versions of basically disc 2, because you have the main release of Escape, which was a remix album originally, and then the deluxe version had a second disc which came with all the original tape demos. And so 90% of this album had already leaked in a different form prior to what we actually hear. Like, they're completely different than what we hear. And Escape, the original leak versus the original version that was used on the album, have slight differences, but the main feel is there. And that song has always been heavily played on my old little MP3.
I do find it funny too, because like obviously around that time there was a whole big thing about, you know, bands having their music leaked out onto like Napster and LimeWire and the like before they could actually get their proper release. And now you've got some bands who are releasing only singles and then basically culminating them together, or maybe eventually into some semblance of an album, which is basically at that point just a playlist of the singles that they've released. And it kind of feels like that's the natural outcome of the whole getting leaked before release, travesty for musicians.
Yeah, well, I noticed that for a couple of years, that's what the feel was. You know, a lot of singles, and when the quote unquote album would come out, it was just essentially a compilation of those singles. And I want to say Maroon 5 did that. I think I might be wrong, but I remember there's a popular pop artist that had done that. It's just that's just where we are now, in a world where music is digitally recorded instead of analog and on tape. Because back then, unless you had a 12-inch tape player or a reel-to-reel player or some sort of like DAT tape player or a zip disc or whatever format you were using as a producer, you couldn't get those songs off in order to leak. And now with, the fact that everybody anywhere at any time can get a recording software like Ableton or Pro Tools or FL Studios, Cubase, anybody who has that can get access to anything. And then that once they're digitized and the masters put into where the recording studio is, all it takes is for one jerk to walk in there and plug in their USB, and there you go. You have your entire album out.
Snuck it out Black Widow styles. Just walk in, plug the USB stick in, and walk out like you own the place. Okay, so now we have to do the rundown here and pick our one song above all. So I'll go first here. Off of 1972's Got to Be There, I went with In Our Small Ways. From the album Ben, I went with Shooby-Dooby-Doo-Da-Day. 1973's Music and Me, I went with Euphoria. From Forever Michael, I went with Cinderella Stay a While. From 1979's Off the Wall, I went with Get on the Floor. From 1982's tiny little album called Thriller, I went with the title track, Thriller. From 1987's Bad, I went with Dirty Diana. From 1991's Dangerous, I went with Give In to Me. Off of History Disc 2, I went with Tabloid Junkies. From 2001's Invincible, I went with You Rock My World. From the first posthumous release, Michael, released in 2010, I went with Hold My Hand. And off of Escape, I went with Escape. But if I had to pick one, and I've been flip-flopping on this a little bit here, and I think I have to go, this is where it gets tough, right? Because you get through some of these albums like, okay, that was a tough album, and then you get through the whole thing, it's like, holy crap. But I think I have to go with Dirty Diana.
Nice.
This is the song to me that, it was the ultimate pinnacle of Michael Jackson proving that he could conquer, pop and rock at the same time and have people sit there and go, okay, I like my rock, but that's good. That's good. Like, this is the pinnacle of crossover hits to me. And it is. It's such a good song. And Steve Stevens just wails. Steve Stevens on this song is better than Slash on Given to Me.
Absolutely.
And knowing as much as I love what Slash has done in all his outfits, that's a big statement, but Steve Stevens killed it on that song. So for me, if there can only be one Michael Jackson song, it has to be Dirty Diana. But for you, let's hear the rundown, and then what is your one song above all?
All right. So from the Got to Be There album, I picked I Want to Be Where You Are. From Ben, I picked Ben. From Music and Me, I picked Euphoria. From Forever Michael, I picked One Day in Your Life. From Off the Wall, I picked Off the Wall. From Thriller, I picked PYT. From Bad, I picked Liberian Girl. From Dangerous, I picked Keep the Faith. From History, I picked They Don't Care About Us. From Invincible, I picked You Rock My World. From Michael, I picked Best of Joy. And from Escape, I picked Escape. And if I had to pick just one song out of that specific list to represent Michael Jackson, I would pick They Don't Care About Us.
Okay. Why that song?
Well, like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the song, it hits a situation that worldwide we are still facing today. Funny enough, so this song has officially 3 music videos. One of them got banned, and it was Michael Jackson in a prison with inmates while there's TVs in the background playing big events of during that up until that time. So you had like the Martin Luther King speech, you had Malcolm X, you had like just everything that was going on in the world at that time that was based off of just people not being kind to another and all the racism that people face every single day. They had the second version, which had essentially nothing to do with the song, which was shot in Brazil, but it was an extended video, basically just showing off the talent in that town or that village that they were shooting in. And the third version was Spike Lee, I believe it was, that redid the third video, which was a mix of the two, but also adding snippets and clips from the Black Lives Matter movement. So, I'm a big believer of, people should just be able to love one another. At the end of the day, we're all human, right? So because we're all human, we are not all different. And I think that They Don't Care About Us really speaks to like that specific situation.
Alex, that's awesome. All right. So before we go, tell us one more time, where can our listeners find you on YouTube, on Twitch, and on Twitter?
All right. So on YouTube, my YouTube channel is ACOfficial music page. Very long title, but very specific. On Twitch, it is Game with AC. That is me. And on Twitter, I believe is also ACOfficial music page or ACOfficial. Now there you get to be thoroughly entertained.
Alex, thank you so much. And as always, you have a standing open invitation whenever you want to come back on this show or over on It's Not That Bad. You know you're always welcome back.
I appreciate it.
All right. Now, to you, our listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is an artist that you want us to cover, hit us up on Twitter at OnlyOneCast, or go over to our website at notthatbadcast.com, where you can find all our episodes of this show and of It's Not That Bad. Drop us a line over there. Let us know who the artist is, and we will go through the entire studio discography. Alex, again, thank you so much. I'm Jason. This is There Can Only Be One. Until next time, everyone, take care.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. We're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.